I am to go through and let you know what's happening in schools of pharmacy. And as you see, there is the School of Pharmacy at the bottom. It's the foundation of everything, of course. But it also touches into companies and literatures, and I want to just briefly cover those for you, and then we'll have a question and answer session. Schools of pharmacy are required as part of their accreditation to teach compounding. These are the current requirements of ACPE that came out in 2016, and schools that are being accredited at this point must meet these standards. I want to point out the second and the fourth bulletin because that's kind of what, to me, is what you are wrestling with. Number one, we're required to somehow prove the accuracy regarding to a drug product or a dose that has been compounded. And the other one is that we have to somehow address that the formulation that you made is appropriate as being safe and effective. Okay, now there's other requirements, but those are the two I think that you all are interested in. Study in 2012 that I was the chair of the committee is the one study that is out that tells you what goes on in schools of pharmacy regarding non-sterile compounding. There is another study that talks about sterile compounding and what goes on in schools of pharmacy, but I think that's been ruled off the table, and that's fine. But if you're interested in that, I can tell you about that study too. In this study that was done, we were looking at how do we assess what people do, and then how do we assess what they make. Those are two different processes. You can do something right, but you can have a crummy product, or you can do it totally wrong, and you might get lucky. Same kind of deal. So the top bullet there, assessment of student work, the top three, you can see how faculty evaluated what students did. And those are the percentages that people used. Outside of that, it was a hodgepodge. Or they didn't answer the question. That was the other deal. The last two talk about how do people evaluate. And this has to do with the concentration of whatever ingredient was in whatever product you were making. And this dealt with all products, not just creams, solutions, suppositories, everything. And what was interesting and what I have been most challenged by is the fact that very few people use quantitative analysis to check that out. And actually you can see that only 8% of the schools in this particular study use that grade, that result, as part of their grade to say you did good or you didn't do good. So that is the study that is there. Out of that study, I thought you would be interested in knowing what topics they taught that seemed to be pertinent to what you all are looking at. These are the topics that are the gels and the ointments, and I thought everything that would be of interest to you. Some of the schools have required courses, and I've listed the number of schools that listed that they taught this particular dosage form. Some of the schools had elective courses, and some schools had both. So I just gave you those that had required courses and those that had elective courses. I didn't try to get into the other one. But you can see that most schools of pharmacy, we had an N of 137. You see that most schools of pharmacy are dealing with topicals in some form, gels or ointments or creams. So a lot of people interchange creams and ointments. So I took that as being interchangeable. So that gives you an idea, at least, of the people that responded to this survey. The other thing that I thought you would be interested in is knowing what are we kind of teaching. And that is that I wanted to know what people were kind of doing like right now. I accepted the invitation to come here 2 weeks ago, and I hit them with a survey. So this is hot data, so to speak, in that it's less than 2 weeks old, okay? Anyway, yes, they do teach how to compound creams and ointments. Well, we knew that anyway. That was nothing unusual. But I was curious if they talked about pain creams specifically. And the answer was no, we don't go in and say you should compound this pain cream and this is the reason why you should compound this pain cream. It can be, though, that the pain cream is the example formulation that they're talking about. I mean, like in our labs, we do PLO and we use ketoprofen, okay? But I don't spend hours talking about ketoprofen. You know, I'm talking about how do you make a PLO emulsion and what's the problems and all the things from the dosage form. Okay, some said that they have their students do a little bit of basic research. I love when you get these non-quantitative terms, you know. And so there was some of that, and then you see that there, some of the people who responded to me said, okay, pain and which pain ingredient you take and all that is taught over in our pharmacotherapy courses, but it's not compounded pain. It's like diclofenac or whatever. So going forward, I wanted to answer Dr. Farrar's question. Yes, I can give you 5 reference books, and I can give you a bunch of literature that will talk about compounded formulations that are out there. The information is there, and I can give you one of them because I write one of them. Okay, so I mean, that's ugly, but that's self-shaming. Okay, now what do our students do beyond that? Okay, our students sometimes go to companies for training. And there are, I just gave you 3 examples here. Sometimes companies talk about compounding in general. Okay, how do you do this? How do you do that? But sometimes they also have focused topics. Like here is one from Spectrum that's talking about their pain management. Here's one from PCCA, and here's one from LP3 now. They just changed their name. And so for pharmacists who are in practice, this is where they can go to get additional training, additional information. And you pay for the courses. I mean, they're not free and all that. But you can go here and you can get trained, and a lot of our students do that. Then the other thing I thought you'd be interested in is the literature. And what do students see when they go do their basic research? Basic research. What they do is they use the literature, and there is, like I said, there's literature there. They'll look at the stability of that particular preparation. They'll look for formulas of different preparations. And then sometimes they'll look for a featured article like, let's talk about oral dispersible films. Okay, so you can find a review article if you want to look at it that way. And then you can start from there. And most of the time in these review articles, they'll give you some formulations and things like that. So what I have heard from you all, I want to answer the question that none of you will ask me. So I want to answer it up front. I love Dr. Carr's idea of a 2-tier view of things. And I think that's an important thing for you all to kind of work with. Number one, you have tier 1, where that you're going to market a drug in this country, you're going to get FDA approval, you're going to go through all of that, you're going to spend $2.6 billion to get that thing on the market, you're going to have 10 years of exclusivity in the patent, and you're planning to make money on it. Okay, that's tier 1. And that is where you now have to apply all of this data and information and everything to the FDA that they require. Tier 2 is kind of where the compounders are. We can't afford to spend $2.6 billion per compound. I mean, we would be out of business. That's number 1. Number 2, we're not trying to market this thing worldwide. We're looking at a smaller audience, okay? And if you look at the literature, and you all have started to get a feel for this, if you look at the literature, it's not as big as what you get from the FDA. And that's because the profit incentive is not there. That's because it is so difficult to do all these studies. I keep hearing what you're all saying. Skin type, formulation type, process type, all that makes a difference. But my basic thing I would leave you with, and I know my time is up, is that even if you have tier 1 FDA products, you still have adverse reactions, and you still don't know how that product's going to behave in a individual person. In tier 2, you don't have some of the things, you may have adverse effects, and yes, you may have to deal with it. And you don't know how that product's going to deal in an individual patient either. So it's two different tiers, but it's kind of the same ballgame in a way. And so I'll hush.